So, one thing I've been wrestling with is watching a lot of the craziness going on in culture. And as I've been digging into and looking at a lot of the ideas and things that are going on around it and what people are saying, I thought, man, the more I learned, I'm just thinking that this is just so completely foreign, so completely alien. I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking it. And it has huge implications for Christians, because a lot of these ideas that we're going to talk about tonight are starting to find their way into the church. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a worldview, this ideology that's kind of finding its way, through culture. It's kind of like under the radar, just kind of made its way across society, and then also is making inroads into the church. Tonight, we're just going to look at the worldview, right? We're just going to take a look at what is it? Why do people believe these things? Well, what does it actually mean when they say certain things? And then next week, we will go into how it measures up against Christianity, the inroads it's making into the church, and why Christians shouldn't believe it, and how it kind of goes against the Bible. Really bummed this ain't working. Got a nice little PowerPoint presentation I spent a lot of time on. So that's going to be the next 2 weeks. Again, tonight, not going to be a lot of Bible and theology type stuff, but we'll get into it next week heavy, because there are some places in church, even in different areas, different ways that people, church leaders and things and schools that have often been thought, safe bastions of biblical fidelity, that are starting to teach in them's doubles. Said triple. I forgive you. Yeah, we'll need them for something else, I'm sure. But let's see, any announcements? July 26th. So we've only got, 3.5 weeks? Sunday, July 26th is the next date for the question and answer. I'm assembling the panel right now. And it looks like we'll probably do online again. Because one, Patrick Cheney, he said he's all in. He wants to do it again. He loves doing it, but he can't make her on to Waco. His wife's having surgery and he needs to be home. And so that is a concern there. And I don't know Dave's availability yet, and whoever else who might get in on it. The online thing might just make a good, way to do it right now. Plus, folks ain't attending. A lot of folks are still choosing to stay home. But either way, next question and answer will be July 26th. And so let's get on with this. All kinds of crazy things, crazy ideas that are going on in our culture, right? And I probably shouldn't use the word crazy, right? Because if there's anybody that's actually watching this that holds some of these ideas, I probably don't want to be calling them crazy. But what we're going to look at, is it's a worldview called critical theory. That's the fancy academic name. But it's an idea that has gotten in, has kind of taken over a lot of places in the culture. And so we're going to take a look at some of the crazy things that people say or do. Hey, Jake, could you do me a favor? Could you turn that TV on so I can see, so I don't have to keep doing this? Appreciate that. Okay. I'm sure you can all relate, right? You've probably been watching the news, listening to something, talking to someone, hearing coworkers or whatever, and they say something, you're just like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, how does that even remotely make sense? Why would you think such a thing? You see stories in the news that are just kind of nutty. And so let's take a look at some of them. But what are some things that y'all have noticed? Like, you've been watching the news, you see a headline, you hear something, you think, what on earth are they talking about? Right? So especially recent events, a lot. It's really ramped up lately. But I'm sure some of the things. Well, some of this will get. I mean, we're not going to get political, but it touches on politics. So some of it is, like news stuff from politics, because politics is downstream from culture, right? So this is cultural ideas that affect, some politics. So if politics is where it comes from, then so like with all the protests and riots and autonomous zones and whatever, nothing crazy, nothing's kind of. You're like, yeah, that's perfectly normal. I don't understand. Yeah, throwing statues down. Well, actually, yeah, we'll take a look at that in a minute, because there's just some things that just don't add up about that. Well, now it's gone. Hey, there we go. All right. Moving right along like a well-oiled machine. Crazy things we have seen in the news, crazy things going on in culture. One, got some screenshots of some headlines. Here you have the Boeing official who was forced to resign because of an article he had written like 30 years ago. He was a veteran, and he had written an article that had to do with women in combat, and he had his reasons that, he said, hey, I don't think women need to be on the front line combat, and there's some reason it's problematic. That's not even controversial. I mean, that's controversial today. Like, that's not even a settled thing. That's still widely held ideas, but people saw that he wrote 33 years ago, and they pressured the company, and he resigned. High-level official. So, all right. I don't know if y'all remember this one. This girl got attacked. The Twitter mob came after her. News, she was called all kinds of names. That's one of the statements she got. She said, my culture is not your blanking prom dress. Do you know what's wrong with her prom dress? It's Asian, and she's not. So this was deemed cultural appropriation, and she was vilified. This is a big no-no, which I don't understand, because I've always been told that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but this is, they came after her for that. Here you have, this one, Fallon Fox, trans woman, a biological male who identifies as a female, who is an MMA fighter, has hospitalized several of his female opponents, because since he identifies as a female, he gets to fight with the females. And two top-level world champion class fighters he's put in the hospital with fractured skulls. And people are called names for not, thinking that's perfectly okay. That's a statement there from, what was her name? Brent, I think it was. Can't remember the first name. But she was, I believe, world-class champion, and she said, I have never felt so much power before. She said, I'm strong as a woman. I'm well above average, abnormal strength for a woman. She said, I was completely helpless in the ring. San Francisco protesters tear down statue of Ulysses S. Grant. Right, we're supposed to be protesting about racial inequality and injustice and oppression of black people. So we're so mad we're going to go tear down a statue of the general who won the Civil War against the South, and then who later, as president, fought the KKK, fought against Jim Crow, fought against or fought to get passed the 13th Amendment, I think also the 14th Amendment, the ones that gave right to vote and full citizenship and all that to former slaves. Yeah, they're going to go tear down his statue. Now, wait a minute. What's going on? If the protest and the riot and everything is about racial issues, he should be your champion. You should love this guy. But they don't. And then you have this. Whenever the coronavirus first popped up, I don't know if y'all remember these headlines. They were upset because Trump's team of experts was all white. That's what they're going to talk and complain about, is that the group of people that he has assembled to be medical experts and health experts to help in this pandemic, there's not enough variation of skin colors up there. You now have more than 75 universities that have Black-only graduations or Black-only dorms, Black-only student centers and other facilities. It's like, hold on a second, this looks like we're going backwards, right? I mean, because it's like you're resegregating. What's going on there? They say, it is voluntary. We're not forcing anyone. They can participate in the main graduation and then they have their own thing, whatever. But I thought the point was to get to a place where it's not the color of the skin, but the character. And so, and then you have this one. Okay, I'm going to play this video. It's about 1.5 minutes long, but just listen. This is a New York City school board Zoom meeting. The guy you're going to see, and you'll see a picture of it, they were talking about racial issues in school and dealing with racism in the schools. And he made a comment that, his living room is integrated, and he grabbed his friend was over, and his friend's a Black person and had their nephew, and he grabbed this 3-4-year-old little kid, put him up on his knee, and he got vilified. And so saying he was racist for doing that. Listen to what she has to say.
Racist, it hurts people when they see a white man bouncing a brown baby on their lap and they don't know the context. That is harmful. That makes people cry. It makes people log out of our meetings. They don't come here. They don't come to our meetings, and they give me a hard time because I'm not vocal enough, and I'm not trying to be a martyr. I'm trying to illustrate to you that you think I'm a social justice warrior, and you think I'm being patronizing, and I'm getting pressure for not being enough of an advocate. And I take that to heart, and that hurts me, and I have to learn how to be a better white person.
I would like to know.
You don't have people telling you that.
I would like to know before this meeting adjourns how having my friend's nephew on my lap was hurtful to people and was racist. Can you please explain?
Tom, I've explained it to you. You can Google, you can read a book. Read Ibram Kendi. Read white fragility. Read how to talk to white people. No, it's not my job to educate you. You're an educated white man,
right.
And you can read a book.
My friend is going to educate you, Robin. My friend will educate you.
So, but here's the thing. Apparently, because the incident with putting the kid in his lap happened at the meeting before this one, and they had gotten apparently hundreds of parents that had signed on to a letter complaining that he would do that and calling it racist and hurtful. What? How do you get racist and hurtful from going, hey, look, here's a little kid? Okay. Here's where this comes from. Because we're looking at it with our set of views, our set of ideas, our foundational view of the world, other people have a different worldview. The way, the filter through which they understand things, they have a completely different foundation. Most of us, for most of our lives, have probably had, been in community, been in places where, Christianity and the Bible, even if people didn't take it seriously, it still formed kind of the foundation of the way people viewed the world. There's a lot of people now that's not what forms their worldview. There's a wide range of different studies and different in the social sciences and schools where they teach these kind of ideas, and there's some of them there on the screen cultural studies, what's called New Feminism, Neo-Marxism, critical race theory, gender theory, queer studies, and there's on and on it goes, where you kind of pick this niche group kind of thing, and it's this social kind of study. All of these have one thing in common. The foundation of them is what is called critical theory. I've had people tell me, oh, critical theory is not a big deal. It's an analytical tool to kind of examine problems in society. But it's not. It's not. We'll especially next week really dig into why it's not just that. It is a worldview. It is a foundational idea that shapes how people view it. Even some atheists, the one in particular, Professor Peter Boghossian, who wrote a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists. He thinks religion is just horrible and, we're all just dummies. And he even looks at critical theory and says, that is a religion. That's not just some academic tool. It is a religion. One of my favorite quotes, I was at a conference and I heard John Stonestreet, some of y'all may know him, said, it's important to look at ideas because ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. And just to show my cards and be right up front, I think critical theory is a horrible, horrible idea that has really, really bad things. So let's get into exactly what it is. Just to give props where they're due, I am sourcing heavily this part of the presentation from a guy named Neil Shenvi. And whenever I say I'm using him as a source, I'm basically plagiarizing, except because I told you that it comes from him, it's now no longer plagiarism. I guess you could say I'm poaching. His website, however, Shenvi Apologetics, I think it is. Good stuff, tons and tons and tons. You could spend hours and hours and hours going through this stuff. But I just kind of picked out just a basic understanding of what is this view. And so let's take a look. There are 4 central premises to critical theory. What is critical theory? Well, there's 4 basic ideas, and this kind of shapes the way they view everything. It's a social binary. First off, they divide everything into a social binary status. We'll look at in a second. Everything is viewed as oppression, but oppression is defined not as we traditionally define it, but as an ideology. Things are based on lived experience, not objective facts. And big emphasis on social justice. Have to right the wrongs of society. So let's dig into these. First, what does it mean that they view everything as a social binary? You probably can't read that, it's really little. These 2 ladies are Dr. Sensoy, I don't know her first name, and Robin DiAngelo. This is in a book they co-authored called Is Everyone Really Equal? Robin DiAngelo, let me just go ahead and, again, lay out my cards. Right now, she is the author of what is one of, if not the best-selling book in America called White Fragility. And it is a flaming dumpster fire of a book. It's garbage. Don't bother reading it, or go read it just so you can see the ideas. It is just mind-numbingly, she's a racist. She's flat out racist, and she's projecting, but we'll get into that later. But this is what they say. This is showing you, I'm going to show you what some scholars and kind of influential voices in this critical theory kind of academic stuff, how they define things. In this book, they say for every social group, there is an opposite group. Okay, so there you got that binary. The primary groups that we name here are race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, status, religion, and nationality. So they say, okay, pick your group, whatever it is. If you're talking sex, if you're talking gender, if you're talking religion, whatever it is you're talking, there's 2 groups. And specifically, they're going to say it's the oppressors and the oppressed. So everything is defined into this oppression, oppressed. So whatever the issue is, they're automatically going to divide everything into 2 groups and view it in terms of this oppression thing. Why do they do this? Well, the background of this, everybody know who Karl Marx is? right? The guy who came up with communism, who left, over 100 million people dead in the last century, and however many tens or hundreds of millions more in abject poverty. He had his ideas that he put forward, but he was an economist. He was all about economy. You got the rich and you got the poor, and that's how he saw things, the rich exploiting the poor. Well, then you get these guys in Germany, in Frankfurt, at a school there, and they take the ideas of Marx, but instead of economics, they apply it to social things like family, like government, like sex, like religion, like all this kind of stuff. And rather than you have the haves and have-nots in Marx, well, now you have the oppressors and the oppressed. So whoever has the power is automatically the bad guy and the oppressor, and whoever is seen as unequal or maybe not at the top of the heap is the oppressed, and everything gets divided out this way. And then in the 30s, several of them actually migrate to America. I know Columbia University is where a couple of them landed, but then these ideas start to take root in the academia of the United States, and they start to spread out from there. And then I think especially it hit the perfect storm in the 60s and 70s with just kind of anti-authority kind of ideas all kind of mixed together, and it really took root. But it's really exploded in the last couple centuries, or a couple decades. So that's where this comes from. It's like, why do they view everything as split everything into oppressor and oppressed? Well, it backtracks and finds its birth in the ideas of communism and Karl Marx of haves and have-nots. But where he was economic, they took it, and now it's applied to social relationships. Okay, so they're viewing everything as the social binary of oppressed and oppressors, but they also changed the definition of what it means to be oppressed. And so oppression occurs through what's called hegemonic power. That word there, hegemony. It comes from a Greek word that just means authority or leadership. Just whatever idea, whatever person, whatever class, whatever happens to be in charge is hegemonic. That's all that means. Is they're the ones in charge. They're the ones setting the pace, setting the goals, setting the tradition. And so, find my notes. Back to those two lovely ladies. They say in that book that hegemony refers to the control of the ideology of society. It's not just that you're in control, but you control the ideas. It says the dominant group maintains power by imposing their ideology on everyone. Uh-oh. Okay. From a critical social justice perspective, privilege is defined as systemically conferred dominance. So the idea is if you appear to have a privileged status, if you are in the majority, right, your ideology is kind of what's forming society. You are an oppressor. You have this power, dominance over others. This is Iris Young wrote that oppression also traditionally carries a strong connotation of conquest and colonial domination. Well, yeah, that's what oppression is, that you're hoarding your power over others and forcing them to your will. It says new social movements in the 60s and 70s, however, shifted the meaning of the concept of oppression. In its new usage, oppression designates the disadvantage and injustice. So if someone's at a disadvantage, they're being oppressed. They're not just disadvantaged, they're being oppressed. And that's why you'll see things whenever, like a big one that was talked about for a while was, or I guess still is, the gender wage gap. The idea that women are paid less on average than men. And they say that's automatically, that's oppression. Just because women make less, that means they're being oppressed. But whenever you actually account for everything and do the math, men are working longer hours. Men are more just driven, white knuckle, succeed, go after it. So they're climbing the ladder more. Women are more likely to hit a point in their life where they go, I'm not after the career thing. I want the family, right? They're more likely to take off. Just a lot of that. So they make less. That whenever you account for all that, it's actually not really. And in some industries, women actually make more. So, but they'll say, no. Because they appear to make less, it's because they are being oppressed. So they've redefined oppression. Then you have this idea of lived experience. Lived experience gives oppressed groups privileged access to the truth. Right? You ever heard, comment like, well, you wouldn't understand because you're not a woman. Well, you wouldn't understand because you're not black or you're not Chinese or, whatever. It's what Vodi Bakum, theologian, preacher, former pastor, he calls ethnic Gnosticism. Now, if you think back to early church history, like the first big kind of heresy fight that the church had going on was with a group called the Gnostics. And they claimed to have special knowledge. Oh, no, we have the special knowledge. And you can only be, saved if you have this special knowledge. And that's kind of the idea here. You can't tell someone else what is really going on. They're the ones who experienced it, so you just have to let them tell you. You'll hear things, whenever people will make, say something about, oh, well, that's racist. And someone goes, well, hold on a second. I don't think it's racist. I think that guy was just a jerk. Well, no, you're not black. You don't know what it's like. You can't speak to it. And that's the way they think. That's what they do. Here is Charles R. Lawrence III. He says, we must learn to privilege our own perspectives. This is him talking as a black guy. We must learn to privilege our own perspectives and those of other outsiders, understanding that the dominant discourse is premised upon claim of knowledge. I love this. The claim of knowledge of objective truths in the existence of neutral principles. We must free ourselves from the mystification produced by this. So they have to free themselves from objective reality, objective truths, and neutral principles. Rather, he says, we must learn to trust our own senses, feelings, and experiences and give them authority. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. It's your experience and your feelings. That's what tells you what it really is. Lived experience. You'll hear that word used a lot, and it's kind of crept its way into different things. Your lived experience, right? And I stop and think about something like this. I'm like, okay, my 4-year-old's lived experience is that there's a monster under her bed. Am I supposed to just accept that there's a monster living under my daughter's bed because that was her experience? But this is the thinking that's dominating this here. This is a kind of popular cultural example, right? I, as a man, I cannot speak out against abortion because it's a woman's thing. No uterus, no voice. You can't say it because you're just a man. Men have no say, right? This is that idea, this lived experience. No uterus, no opinion. You don't get to talk on it. Okay. Last premise, kind of tenet of critical theory, social justice. This is a big one because it's not just that they have these ideas. You got to do something with them. And so you have social justice, which, by the way, if you put a word in front of justice, you've basically just redefined it. Whatever you're talking about, it's no longer justice. But here is I didn't put there we go. Yeah. Mary McClintock. Social justice is the elimination of all forms of social oppression. Right? So they're really concerned with liberating people from their oppression. But how did they define oppression? It's just ideas. Right? This is Bell Hooks in a book called Feminism is for Everybody. says movements for social justice that hold on to outmoded ways of thinking and acting tend to fail. And she goes on to say that that we need to simultaneously be working to undermine and overthrow the system. So it's not enough that within the system you're saying, hey, let's get women equal, let's get women rights, let's get women being treated properly. They said, no, it's not enough that you do that. You need to tear down the system. Because according to her, the system is white supremacist and capitalist and patriarchal. And so it's not enough that we just, get women equal rights. No, we just got to tear down the system. That's social justice. You can't fix the individual things. You got to fix the whole thing. Wipe the board, start it over, because the whole thing is what is wrong. So, just kind of in conclusion, so you got the social binary where everything's divided into, oppressed and oppressors, right? You have those who are dominant and those who are being exploited in their view. This definition of oppression isn't actually a forceful, tyrannical oppression. It's ideas. This is why you get things like microaggressions. Have you heard that term? Where a microaggression is something that maybe you didn't mean to offend someone, but there was just something about what you said that was hurtful and insulting. And some of the things that they'll say is a microaggression is like asking someone where they're from, because that just assumes that they're an outsider. I'm not making this stuff up. It's the things they say. Right? So it's just ideas. Ideas are what oppress, right? Sticks and stones, but words will never hurt me. No. Words will hurt you, according to them. Lived experience, right? It's not about objective facts. Right? Who's the oppressed? Who's the oppressor? Oh, well, I'm experiencing oppression, so it must be true. Lived experience over objective facts. And then we have to fix these. We have to set them right. And social justice. And not just by, it's like, okay, you're oppressed, so here, let's make your situation better. No. We need to tear down the structure of the system as those oppressing you. Because remember, they're thinking in terms of groups, not individuals. Right? When it comes to race, white people, we set the tone, right? It's been our heritage, our culture, so black people are oppressed. Doesn't matter how they're treated, just the very fact that it's white people's ideas, that means other people are being oppressed. And in order to bring about justice, they have to tear down the society. They have to change the systems and the structures. So, questions? Any other questions? Is that why they're tearing things down? I think it is. And let's look at some of this. Okay, let's go back and look at some of these. Why would they demand that this guy from Boeing needs to be fired or needs to resign for something he did 33 years ago? Based on their view now that we've looked at, why would they think that's what needs to happen? He's a white guy. He's an old white guy. Right? And he's saying women can't fight in combat, so his idea is oppressive towards women. He's a white guy. He's an old white guy in a position of power. That means he's part of the system. He's part of the oppression. He's got to go. We have, why would she be vilified for wearing an Asian dress when she's not Asian? It's a really nice dress, yeah. It's binary? Yeah. Well, and Asians are the minority. It's another culture. Since she is an oppressor, she's part of the oppressor group. By her appropriating their culture, they're basically stealing their identity. That would be okay. Yeah, no, that would be okay because they're oppressed, so they're allowed to. That's according to this way of thinking. Why is it okay for a guy who identifies as a woman to hospitalize women and beat them unconscious with fractured skulls? No, he's trans. He's really a woman. So no, see, you're oppressing him. If you don't let him do that, I'm sorry, God, use the right pronouns. She is being oppressed, right? And then so that's why that's the thinking. I actually, Fallon Fox fought another trans athlete, guy who identifies as a woman, and got whooped. So a little bit of justice there, I guess. Okay, why would they be tearing down statues of people who should be their heroes? It does not matter what Grant did. He's a white guy. He's part of the oppressor class. Yes, okay, fine. He may have done some nice things as president, but he was part of the oppressive system, and the system is what needs to be torn down. That's their view. And that's what they're trying to do. The specific, see, we're thinking in terms of individual, right and wrong. What have they done? They're thinking groups, they're thinking system. The groups have done bad things. He's a member of the bad group, so tear his statue down. Yeah, the one that, yeah, there's several things they want to tear down. Yeah. Well, because it shows the white man in the position of power, those black people needed me to free them. I mean, again, it's not what he did, it's what he represents. The group he's a part of, the system he was a part of, that's why he's bad. That's why it needs to come down. Why would we care that all the medical experts, are all white? Right? Because we might be thinking, who's the best doctors? Who's the most qualified? Who's got the most experience? But that's not how that worldview thinks. That worldview thinks, wait a minute, why aren't minorities included? I'm sure several of them probably are Jewish. Right, they're all white, they're oppressors. Social justice demands you have to right that. That's a wrong. And so that has to be righted. Black dorms, why are we segregating again? Didn't we undo all this? But now they're willfully going back into it. Why? Right, so they're yeah. And, we look back at all the struggle and everything we had to go through for that, but now they're viewing things a different way. It's about the group identity, right? According to this view, letting them have their own thing empowers them because that's them as a group in control in the power. Because it all has to do with groups and systems and power structures. Don't think about it about objective right and wrong morality stuff. Individuals, this is based on groups and power structures. And so, in their thinking, that's empowering to separate them off and let them have, their own dorm, their own graduation. Why would this one be racist? Man, this one drove me nuts. Why on earth would this be racist? And I actually, I had to dig some. I had to dig. By the way, I searched and searched every kind of keywords I could think of to search for this story. On Google, I think I had to get to like page 4 or 5 before I found something that was actually about it. And then I eventually found my way to this video. Whenever I went and used a different search engine, popped up just like that. First several links were all about it. But when I was searching on Google, and I searched in, New York city, school, racist, kid, on lap, white guy, black kid, everything that was popping up was basically how to talk to your kids about racism. And it was this kind of stuff. I had to go 4 or 5 pages deep before I got to the actual story I was looking for. Just a thought. But why would this be racist? I had to actually dig into it, and I actually read, because there's, like I said, this was the second meeting. The actual kid on the lap happened in the first meeting, and there was conversation. And then there was stuff that went on in between, and then there was like 40 minutes worth of meeting that arguing was going on. So what I actually dug into, I printed out the transcript, don't know where I put it. People were saying it's offensive. Now, it doesn't matter. See, our thought is to go to, no, wait a minute. Why is it offensive? What's wrong with? No, you're asking the wrong question, because remember, it's not about objective facts. It's about lived experience. And if people wrote in saying that offended me, according to critical theory, it is not our place to try to correct them. We need to just listen, because they know better, because they're lived experience. We need to hear what they're saying. And so actually part of the issue going on here is he was white, and they were talking about integration, right? And he said, somebody called him a racist or something because he made some comment. He goes, I'm not racist. My living room's integrated. Look, picked up a kid, And the issue is, no. Integration, this is almost, I couldn't find the transcript, almost word for word what somebody said. Racism isn't about a person. It's about the system. So integration isn't about, oh, well, good for you, you have a black friend. It's about the system. We need to fix the system. And so it's actually considered racist from their point of view whenever you try to explain. Whenever you ask, what's wrong with this? What's the problem? You're being racist because you're not listening to their lived experience. And I know, I see the looks on your faces. It sounds bizarre, but this is what they say. You can go, I can give you the links. I actually, and it's probably some back there in my bag. I can find the transcript of that conversation and just read the things these people were saying in the prolonged, drawn out conversation. It wasn't all screaming like the lady in the video, but you hear the things they're saying or read the things they're saying. You're just like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense, but it does on their view, because this is where they're coming from. Whenever she was rattling off in the video, you need to just read some books, go read. And she mentioned an author, and she mentioned several books and, a couple names. Those are all critical theory, scholar people who teach this stuff. And so she was saying, go educate yourself and go read the people who have this point of view, not any actual objective facts, but people with this point of view. So, okay. Any questions? What do we do about it? That's wonderful. That's going to be the cliffhanger. We get to come back next week and figure that out. This is the thing that drives me so crazy, is that you get lectured about, you hear about, talk about racism and things like that from people with this point of view. Whenever you break down what exactly it is that this point of view does, it defines categories of people, right? So it defines these categories of these group identity. So we're going to identify you according to your race, according to your sex, according to your, whatever the thing is, we're going to identify you by that. Okay, and then we're going to, you as an individual, you don't get to have your own identity Your identity is according to what group you're a part of. And then, depending on what group you're a part of, you're going to get assigned status or value. You're an oppressor or you're an oppressed. You need to be quiet and listen, or you have a voice and you get to talk. Right? That's going to be assigned to the individual based on which group they belong in. What does that sound like to you? If we're doing this way of thinking with regards to race, hey, we're going to just identify what group you're in and decide whether you get to have a voice or whether you have value. What do you call that? Racism. Flat out textbook racism is what this is. Blows my mind that people don't see it and they fall into this way of thinking. So here are some problems. Let me go and just put out some problems that I think come from this. Because, people are talking about inequality and, there's unfairness and there's injustice. We need to fix the injustice. And they're viewing things from this point of view. And here's why I think it's a problem. Next week, we're going to get into Bible and the religious and the worldview aspect of it and Christianity and how the stuff's getting the church and all that. But just looking at it just from just straight ideological viewpoint, this is very divisive. Okay, it makes unity impossible. Okay, ladies, I'm an oppressor and you are oppressed. How can we ever come together? It divides us. Right? How can you ever get together with your Black or Hispanic, or Asian or whatever neighbors and have unity? Because this ideology says, no, you're separate, you're an oppressor, they're oppressed, you're at odds. There can be no unity. It perpetuates this us versus them attitude. It removes personal responsibility. One of the things that you've heard, like with the riots, and it's like, well, they're burning stuff down and they're breaking things and they're doing this. Well, you need to understand the pain. Right? I mean, there's actually been, officials, government officials, media, personalities who have said stuff like that. Where it's like, okay, yes, we're all upset about George Floyd, so let's go ransack a Target and burn down a police station. And if you go, wait a minute, why are you rioting? People go, hey, you don't need to ask. You shouldn't be asking why they're rioting. You need to be asking why they're so mad. They're justifying the actions, right? People are tearing down statues. These things cost money. And they and some of them, like we looked at Grant, that represent the ideals we should be striving for, right? And people go, well, rather than saying, yes, stop them, stop that, the answer is, well, they're suffering under oppression, right? Personal responsibility out the window. You're no longer responsible for what you do because it's not about you, it's about the group. And if you're in the oppressed group, then you get a pass. It unjustly blames innocent people. One thing that Robin DiAngelo says in her book, White Fragility, and you may have heard this said, all white people are racist. All of them. You might think, no, wait, I'm not racist. I don't hate black people. I don't think against black people, right? I want to know, just the fact that you're part of the oppressor class, the oppressor race, even if you personally don't do anything racist, you're part of the problem because white people are the problem, right? Or have you heard say, well, black people can't be racist? Because through this point of view, it has to do with power. And they say, minorities aren't in power. And so they can't be racist, according to this view. It requires destruction of society. There is no solution. There is no policy, there is no law that's just going to fix this and make it work, because the problem is the system. And some of them are just flat out, they say the quiet part, the things you're not actually supposed to say out loud. Some of them actually do say it because they didn't get the memo that you're not supposed to say it out loud and give away your agenda. But they'll actually come out and just flat out say it. What was it? Oh, goodness. There's been several. Was it Seattle? I don't know. I want to say it was Seattle. A councilwoman who was basically saying, we're going to tear down your system. Our goal is a complete transformation of the system. So it's not, we can't fix society's problem because society is the problem. And lastly, there can never be success. There is no goal. Because what happens as soon as you do turn society on its head, well, now you got a new group who's the oppressor. And it never ends. There's always some way that you can point and say they're the bad guys and they're the oppressed. There's always some way that you can divide it up. Because their whole foundation is viewing things through the binary, through the oppressed and the oppressors. And as long as that's the lens through which you're viewing everything, you can never actually get to a solution, because there will always be another oppressed group. There will always be, like I said, even if it switches. We're on track. I think white people are already the minority, or we're very close. I think we're the minority majority. We're the biggest group, but we're no longer more than 50%. Well, okay. So what happens whenever we're the marginalized? Well, now we'll be the oppressed ones. You can never. It's endless. It's just a cycle of division and hate that just goes on and on and on. And so that is my thoughts on that. Next week, we'll actually get into the biblical issues and how these ideas are getting into the church, because they sound so good. Don't you want justice? Don't you want equality? Doesn't the Bible say we're supposed to help the oppressed? Right? And so it sounds good. And we'll take a look at why, well, even aside from this, we'll get into theologically and biblically how it's affecting the church and how we as followers of Christ should respond. All right. Can't we all just get along? I hope so. Good. And just in case I was unclear, critical race theory is racism. It's evil, and it should be done away with. All right. Just in case you missed it.